You aren't afraid, are you?
No, but I respect some of the superstitions of others.
Good evening, and welcome to Planned Parenthood Great Plains' first ever Trick or Treatment, a virtual celebration of Planned Parenthood's work in Arkansas. I'm Emily Wales, the Chief Operating Officer, and I'm here both to welcome you and to let you know that, like so much of 2020, we've had some unexpected and less than desirable challenges with this evening's event. We'd intended to bring you an inside look at our health center with interviews from staff and a behind the scenes view of the space that our team has called home for over a year now in Little Rock. Unfortunately, some unforeseen COVID related challenges have intervened in our plans, so we won't be able to share that video with you tonight. But don't fear, we will be sending out the footage as a thank you for joining us later. So really it's almost a gift to you, because just when you think this Halloween themed party is over, and you are dying to relive the memories, you'll be able to get a bonus video from us. So keep an eye out and we'll be sending it soon. More importantly, while I'm sure you'll miss hearing from our team, you will still have the opportunity to hear from folks you know and love. Our panelists, Bettina Brownstein, Lee Doyle, and Jay Barth, join moderator Max Brantley for a conversation that is insightful, thought-provoking, and frankly, pretty funny. This unusual and difficult year has meant finding ways to adapt and overcome, and that has certainly been true for our healthcare providing team. They have continued to provide care that is comprehensive and high quality throughout the pandemic, and they can do their work because of your continued support and commitment. So with that, thank you, and let's let the tricks and the treatment begin.
Hello everyone and welcome. Thank you for joining us tonight for Trick or Treatment benefiting Planned Parenthood Great Plains in Little Rock. My name is Austin Ross and I'm the Arkansas organizer for Planned Parenthood Great Plains, and I'm excited to be tonight's MC. Normally, of course, we'd have this event in person at our annual garden party, and although we'll miss seeing your faces, we're glad you could attend this virtual event where we can safely celebrate our community. We know times are tough and things look and feel a little different this year, but PPGP is beyond thankful to have each and every one of you here with us tonight. For decades, Planned Parenthood Great Plains has been providing reproductive health care in Arkansas with no plans to ever stop. Because of a community of supporters like you, PPGP is able to continue providing essential, time-sensitive services to thousands of Little Rock area patients, even through a global pandemic. That's something that we can all be proud of. Now, let's celebrate tonight with President and CEO Dr. Brandon Hill. We also hope you'll enjoy a panel discussion with longtime supporters and reproductive rights champions in our area. It's going to be a great event. I can feel it in my bones. First up, it is my great pleasure to introduce Dr. Brandon Hill. Brandon is in his third year as president and CEO of Planned Parenthood Great Plains. As a national expert on sexual and reproductive health, Brandon has a deep understanding of what it means to provide services in an ever-changing healthcare environment. In his first years with PPGP, he's traveled extensively throughout our region, building connections with the communities PPGP serves and helping advance our mission while advocating for inclusive, comprehensive healthcare for everyone, no matter what. Everybody, please give a warm welcome to Dr. Brandon Hill.
Welcome, everyone, and thanks, Austin. I'm Brandon Hill, and I have the pleasure of serving as President and CEO of Planned Parenthood Great Plains. Thank you all so much for attending this evening. Your support is vital to the work that we do. I would first like to take a moment to thank and recognize our sponsors and committee members who so diligently planned and supported this year's garden party. When we first began planning this event back at the beginning of the year, we expected to be joining together in person for our 33rd annual garden party. While many of the details have changed from the original event, I'm so grateful for our committee members who found innovative ways to virtually celebrate Planned Parenthood in Little Rock. I'd like to offer a special thanks to Murray Newbrin and Sydney Ranch, who helped make trick-or-treatment possible tonight. And of course, I want to welcome and thank each and every one of you for watching. By being with us, you are also helping us continue our critically important work here in Little Rock and across our 4 states, providing essential healthcare services for our patients and protecting sexual and reproductive healthcare under the dome. It's an important time to come together in support of our work as we face unprecedented and declining health outcomes in 2020, whether that be the continued threat of COVID-19, attacks on access to healthcare from legislators, or institutional racism experienced by our Black communities and by communities of color that is a true public health and human rights crisis. By attending Planned Parenthood events, supporting the care we provide with a gift, being a patient in one of our health centers, or even all 3, you can make a huge difference here in Little Rock as well as across the state of Arkansas. Never before has our community's support meant so much. In an era where we face increasing political pressures, we're working to protect our patients' rights, not just in the health centers, but in our communities, in courtrooms, and in state houses. As you know, the pressures we face aren't just political, they affect our ability to keep our doors open and to provide care to tens of thousands of patients. Donors like you are crucial to sustaining our services across the state. In addition to showing your support by being here tonight, you have the opportunity to participate in a Fund a Need in tonight's program. We hope you will consider a contribution to support our patients and the communities we serve. Your support goes directly to patient care and to the work we do in education and research. Because of supporters like you, we were able to open a new state-of-the-art and conveniently located health center in Little Rock. For years, we had been searching for a larger location to meet growing patient demand and to expand access to healthcare within our area. And we found the perfect place. The new space reflects the high-quality care our patients receive each day, as well as meets the long-term needs of our devoted staff. The opportunity to open this location comes at a time of increasing hostility towards reproductive rights. At a local level, the new health center allows us to expand our healthcare, advocacy, and outreach work, which is essential to delivering our mission. Many of you know that in an effort to limit in-person care during the global pandemic, we launched our affiliate-wide telehealth program. Our telehealth program consists of 2 key initiatives. First, we are connecting with our existing patients, offering a range of health services that can be provided over video. And second, we rolled out a smartphone app, PP Direct, which offers flat-rate contraception that can be delivered directly to a patient's home, allowing us to reach across the state and especially in rural areas. Since the launch of this program in early April, we have provided more than 500 telehealth visits across Arkansas. We're delighted at the success of this program and the innovation our team showed to ensure consistent care throughout the pandemic. When we began 2020, we had record numbers of patient visits, with volumes 20% higher across the entire affiliate, which is almost 4,000 more patients than in 2019. Of course, the pandemic has changed the way we provide care, with social distancing and reduced numbers of patients in our waiting room, yet the need for sexual and reproductive health care remains the same. Since the onset of the pandemic in April, we have provided more than 3,500 sexual and reproductive health care visits in Arkansas, and the vast majority have been to patients who are underinsured or uninsured. Because of our new Aldersgate location and our expanded clinical care team, I'm happy to report that even during the pandemic, we were able to see a 25% growth in patient volume. We're also working on expanding access to care by continuing our mission to reopen our health center in Northwest Arkansas in 2020. Your support now will greatly help us once we're ready to reopen. In 2021, we are also working on expanding access to care by continuing our mission to reopen our health center in Northwest Arkansas. Your support now will greatly help us once we're ready to reopen. While we continue delivering care, I want to reiterate that we are still fighting for the rights of Arkansans. The constitutional right to abortion in Arkansas is under attack. Last year, Governor Hutchinson signed into law a restriction that would ban abortion in almost every case if Roe v. Wade was overturned. As if this wasn't bad enough, there were 9 additional bills restricting access to safe, legal abortion in Arkansas that became law. Some are still tied up in legal battles, but many of them have been enacted. We know these attacks will continue, so donors like you are vital in helping us sustain our critically important work in Arkansas. We're honored to be a part of the Little Rock community, where we care for our neighbors and our friends. At our health center, we provide essential health care to Arkansans each and every day. And as you know, dedication to supporting and uplifting one another is a part of what makes Little Rock a great community. And together, we care for all. We hope you will consider a contribution to support the services our patients need and deserve during our Fund a Need. You'll see graphics providing more information about how to participate in the Fund a Need in just a moment. Again, I want to end by thanking you for your support this evening. Please enjoy tonight's panel discussion, and I hope to see you in person very soon.
Well, good evening. I'm, as I said, Max Brantley. I'm with the Arkansas Times. I've been covering politics and news in Arkansas for 47 years or so. And in the course of that time as a reporter and editor and opinion writer, I eventually came to write about reproductive rights in Arkansas and women's rights in Arkansas, and that meant Planned Parenthood. And I've become a big supporter, not only in columns, but also through a foundation I work for. So I'm here as an advocate for Planned Parenthood. Although not as much as the worthy people I'm with tonight. I'm joined tonight by Jay Barth, politics professor emeritus. I don't know if you get that title at Hendrix College, but now the chief education officer for the city of Little Rock. Dr. Lee Doyle, emeritus professor in the Department of Obstetrics and Gynecology in UAMS. Bettina Brownstein, lawyer, which covers a lot of ground, activist. I guess one of the main movers behind the Progressive Women's Caucus, and frequently in court on behalf of Planned Parenthood, if not directly Planned Parenthood reproductive rights in Arkansas. This is a pretty worthy panel. And I think one of the first things I wanted to ask was ask other people how y'all got involved in Planned Parenthood and what the span of your involvement has been. Maybe, Lily, why don't you start off?
Well, probably because I'm the oldest one here, so I have the longest history. I basically got interested in it when I was at UC San Francisco, and we were doing some of the original trials with the intrauterine device. I didn't know Planned Parenthood from anything, but I was so impressed with the people that I was working with. And then when I moved here, of course, there was no Planned Parenthood, but the chancellor had asked me if I would represent the medical school on the Arkansas Family Planning Council board. Was a Title X organizations and had clinics all over the state through community centers. Right up until we had our Title X approved for the year, we were a Title X agency for family planning. And Frank White, who was a Republican governor, managed somehow to get the Title X funds removed from the Arkansas Family Planning Council and given to the health department. So that ended any sort of Title X funds outside the health department. And then Planned Parenthood had voiced an interest earlier and had sort of failed in trying to start an affiliate in Little Rock. And Brownie Ledbetter, who was a force of nature is the only thing I can think of, really got involved with it and got the whole thing going. And I guess my favorite memory, I was the first president of Planned Parenthood. And Brownie said she proposed me because I had a doctor in front of my name and nobody knew who I was. So that started my involvement with our chapter, and I've been involved ever since. I degree, my PhD is in reproductive physiology, and I'm a woman, so it's natural.
Sounds good. Bettina?
I'm a transplant from Southern California, and I was a patient at Planned Parenthood when I was a young woman. To me, Planned Parenthood was non-controversial, non-political. It was, abortion, reproductive rights was not on the forefront of anybody's mind, particularly in California. I came here, and I hate to sound so ignorant. I don't know. Somehow somebody asked me to be on the Planned Parenthood board. I really don't know.
Probably Brownie.
I don't know why. Suddenly I'm on the board like a year after I came here in 1985. And that's, I think George Wittenberg was the president at that time, or maybe David Powell. And then subsequently I became president, still not really knowing very much what I was doing. That began to me, the reproductive wars in Arkansas. When early on, it was the first, go around trying to get Amendment 68 to make it, the policy of the state of Arkansas that, life begins at conception. There can be no public funding of abortion. That started, that was initiated. I don't know if it was a referendum from the legislature, initiated act by the, coming through the initiative process. But I remember it was not approved by Supreme Court. I think there was a battle that the ballot title was too, confusing. Correct me, anybody, if I'm wrong. We won that victory, but it was short-lived, and it's been a huge battle ever since then, with us, people in favor of reproductive rights slowly losing ground with this implacable, force of, so-called right to life against us. So I learned a lot being on the board of Planned Parenthood. I learned a lot about board politics, not all of it positive. I'd say it made me grow up in a lot of ways. But unfortunately, it's been kind of an exhausting, although at times exhilarating fight. It's been exhausting, and we haven't been winning in Arkansas. So there you are.
I think Jay knows the political story.
Yeah, well, I had started volunteering for Planned Parenthood when I was in graduate school in Chapel Hill, and I was initially very much drawn to Planned Parenthood because of its commitment to comprehensive sexuality education. And that was really I saw that as, I often see education as the answer to everything, and it's not, but it's pretty darn important when it comes to understanding who one is, how one's body works and who one is sexually. And I had gone to Catholic high school and had not exactly gotten comprehensive sexuality education as a young guy. So I started volunteering in Chapel Hill, and then I came home to Arkansas in 1994 and reached out to Planned Parenthood to volunteer. And I pretty quickly got on the board. I don't think I was yet 30. And it was my first time on a nonprofit board, and there were just great folks on that board. I mean, I think Bettina, you may have just rotated off, but Lily was on, Browning was still on, Ruth Shepard was on, Jim Wola was on. I mean, they were just really great folks who were really thoughtful leaders. And I really, through that experience, really learned how to do board work, nonprofit board work. And that's been a real important part of my life. And I really, I don't know why they put me on the board, much like y'all. But somehow, I guess I was just the young guy that they were curious about. But it was really a valuable experience. In the late 90s, when I was first involved, several things really stand out. First off, we were often winning things in the state legislature, basically because we had a Senate Public Health Committee that was just, magical. Things would get to abortion limitations would get to Senate Public Health, and then they would just get stymied.
Now, hey, tell who was on that board. Wasn't it Nick Wilson and
Nick Wilson, Jay Barth?
Yeah.
And sometimes there were weaker members who would just take a walk when it was time for a vote, and that was fine because it really stopped some pretty bad things from happening. And And it was also a period, as I know you all remember, when I think there was a real sense of violence, providers. And Planned Parenthood, which was then located on Markham Street, pretty awful building on a mid-century building on Markham, we were not a provider of abortion at that point, but there was a provider down the street. And so often when the kind of traveling groups who opposed abortion and were in some places behind some of the killings of abortion doctors around the country, would come to town, and you would it would be all men and women on deck to kind of protect the fortress. It was a very interesting time, and there was that kind of that constant tension around the threat of violence, which I think is truly extraordinary. And I'm so fearful.
I think actually, sorry to interrupt you, I think it still exists now.
Well, and that's
Yes.
what I was about to say. And I think
We had some of the really bad actors in the anti-abortion movement came to Little Rock. I mean, some people that got in legal trouble with the police for things they did. I want to throw in a personal note that my wife got so mad at one of the regular protesters that stood outside the Markham Street clinics, she got distracted in traffic and in a traffic wreck, and the guy, I won't name him, he's a familiar, somewhat local lawyer, was in danger of bodily harm for me after this happened. but I stayed peaceful in the end.
But what I remember when they came to town, Operation Rescue, I think it was. And
Yes.
I remember, I've got to give the kudos to the Little Rock police. They did a great job.
Yes, I remember
they
that.
cooperated with Little Rock Family Planning and Planned Parenthood, and they really stopped a lot of what could have been some ugly moments. They were terrific. And I think they continue to be very good when it comes to protecting the clinics that provide abortion.
It reminds me that I was struck. I went to a fundraiser at Trio's restaurant, I think, and there was a plainclothes policeman there providing security. And it struck me as a minute, gosh, that we've got to have security at a cocktail party at a restaurant. But they're also very good at the lawn party, which we're not able to, garden party, which we're not able to have this year. And this is something of a substitute. And the group that gathers outside there to picket the event, I mean, I'm not prone to fear very much, but there's sort of a children of the village of the damned looks about them. I mean, they leave you unsettled, and it's nice to have the police out there keeping order on the sidewalk.
Have you ever been out you need to go see what happens at Little Rock Family Planning Clinic.
Oh, it's even worse there.
Oh my God, they are absolutely crazed and frightening.
Well, they also, the
ahead,
protesters
sorry.
at one time were picketing doctors who provided abortions, picketing their homes.
Right.
And the interesting thing was, one of them said, I only wish that medical ethics didn't keep me from telling how many of them had an abortion or had a child who had an abortion.
That's the terrible thing. These protesters often have availed themselves of the services of Planned Parenthood. But of course, confidentiality and HIPAA prevents the providers from exposing them. But can you imagine how galling that must be to be a provider and to have provided that service and then have that person, picketing against you and advocating that you
in
be
your home
criminally
with your
prosecuted?
children.
Yeah. Anyway.
Well, we kind of jumped ahead to something that's
Sorry.
No. That's my greatest interest is the political evolution of Arkansas on these and related issues. I think it's worthwhile saying we're talking about an organization that has clinics, I guess, in Little Rock and Fayetteville. It doesn't provide surgery, surgical. What's the correct phrase, Bettina?
Surgical abortion, surgical procedures. But
we provide a pharmaceutical abortion in the very early stages of pregnancy. But that's not all. I mean, there's also health screenings, STD efforts, birth control, particularly, which I love to harp on, is with good contraceptives. You don't need to have abortions.
You don't make it illegal. You make it unnecessary.
You make it unnecessary. And I particularly, in the early stages of the Asa Hutchinson administration, that really started forming my real, very different view of him than the public at large, which sees him somewhat as a moderate figure. When one of the first things he did was pick up the stories about the abortion clinic in California that may or may not have had some trade in fetal tissue, and cut off all funding to Planned Parenthood in Arkansas, because and defamed Arkansas Planned Parenthood as being a part of this and doing unethical things, neither of which were true, and that was lost. And since then has been a steadfast supporter of every single thing that cuts down not only abortion services, but really broader access to birth control, broader comprehensive sex education, everything that could make for a better situation in Arkansas. And I think I've got some of the great numbers here about how many poor people we have that don't have medical services, what our infant mortality rate is, what our teen pregnancy rate, all the reasons that we need more Planned Parenthood, not less.
Well, Max,
One of the most wonderful things, I think, is when I first got interested in Planned Parenthood in the 50s and 60s, it was pretty much contraception. There weren't a whole lot of services, most of the affiliates then. And now the array of services we offer is mind-boggling. And they're things that are so needed by so many women and men that are available through Planned Parenthood, because Planned Parenthood has grown with the need. They have grown their services.
Yeah, and I think, Lily, it's the queer friendliness of Planned Parenthood, I think, was really crucially. It's still very important in terms of the trans services, in terms of PrEP availability, keeping people safe in their sexual lives. But that was really exceptional in the 90s.
Yes.
And as a gay guy coming back to Arkansas, it was one of the few kind of friendly outposts for the LGBTQ community. Even though that was not its primary mission, it still was in a place where there wasn't much in the way of organizations or any friendliness towards queer folks. Planned Parenthood and, of course, the ACLU of Arkansas were those places where there was that kind of spirit of openness and equality.
Yes, I totally agree.
So what about, do you have individual memories of things that have occurred or people that have been served? I know at the garden party, the last one I went to, there were some wonderful personal stories of people who've been served by Planned Parenthood.
Well, let me just say, I'm one of the lawyers representing Planned Parenthood in the what I call the Medicaid defunding lawsuit, which is ongoing still. And because of the COVID, crisis, the resolution of the case trial has been postponed seemingly indefinitely. But as part of that litigation, we had to interview and get statements from women who have been patients or want to be patients, want to get abortion services at Planned Parenthood and Little Rock Family Planning. And they are so incredibly touching. And I've been doing this work, for more than 30 years. But I found myself very distraught listening to these stories of these women that were in terrible financial and personal shape, that wanted an abortion, that couldn't get it because, the state stopped abortion for a period of time. I wish people could hear these personal individual stories of the desperation of these women, some of whom who have children already, who have disabilities, who have no support from anywhere, who have low-paying jobs, who have a car that doesn't run, who are at their wit's end and cannot fathom having another kid, get no help from anyone. I just don't even know how anybody who is quote unquote pro-life would not be moved by these stories. And these are the women who Planned Parenthood serves, both for contraceptive care, other care, and abortion if necessary. I mean, Planned Parenthood people and the lawyers, we're all, even though we've done this, we are crying when we hear these stories. And I don't understand. I just don't understand this. I don't understand right to lifers. I mean, I don't.
Jay or Lily, any individual stories that you can recall?
I think my biggest story in anything was before Roe v. Wade was in effect, and I was working at UC San Francisco in the OB-GYN department. And we used to have what was called Tijuana Tuesday. And this was because abortion was not legal, and they would fly to or drive or walk, whatever, to Tijuana and have abortion on the weekend. And then by Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, usually on Tuesday, they came into the hospital grossly affected. And I remember one morning that one of the clinicians I worked with came in, and he was obviously very upset. He was in tears. And I said, what's the matter? He said, do you know, and he mentioned a nurse who had worked on the OB unit. And I said, yeah, I know her. Why? And he said, she died this morning. She came back from Tijuana and we couldn't save her. And I think that was the first time it ever became a personal event to me. I was this nice straight-laced little Catholic girl who, when anybody said abortion, I sort of shivered. And then later on, and I got my degree and became a reproductive physiologist, I thought there is no such thing as a moment of conception as far as physically. It's a process, it's not a moment. And I think the big change in me came from seeing, as Bettina said, the personal aspect and how if there's no help, these women will die. And we're not going to go back to having no abortions. We're going to go back to having illegal abortions and a lot more deaths.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Unless maybe, medication abortion is available via the internet or.
Well, that's illegal.
Lee, you know more about that than I do, but I would think that many women will.
Louise Tyler got arrested years ago, bringing back RU 480, whatever it is, from England.
Yeah.
I think what I remember kind of from the late 90s in particular was just how fragile Planned Parenthood was in Central Arkansas, financially very fragile. And certainly and that was a good lesson in nonprofit board work. I've been involved in a lot of organizations that are fragile financially. There were a couple of moments where it just didn't look like it was going to survive. And it was only through the merger process that it did survive. And Jim Wolub and I were kind of the task force, or two of the folks on the task force, to kind of think about different merger options. And so we traveled to Memphis to talk to the affiliate there. We went to Tulsa to talk to the affiliate there. I think we even had a conversation with folks in Oklahoma City, which didn't make any sense geographically, but we had a lot of different conversations, and of course ended up merging with the Tulsa affiliate to become Greater Arkansas and Eastern Oklahoma, Planned Parenthood Greater Arkansas and Eastern Oklahoma. And that was really crucial in terms of saving the movement here in Central Arkansas, and it was still fragile. And of course, we've had a series of mergers since then that have kept us alive. But I think it's really important to recognize, as was suggested earlier, there have been these Planned Parenthood has come into existence and then gone away here. It's always been very fragile, despite the fact that there have unquestionably been some ongoing, very generous donors who have done their best to keep it alive, but it's not been easy. And there was a lot of tension at that time about the issue of providing. There were some members of the board who
I remember that. You're right. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah,
you're right.
There was a lot of tension. There were some on the board who just said, we just can't go there in terms of providing abortion.
Right.
However, that was really crucial. It was both, mission driven to consider providing, but it was also, in terms of the business model, a very important, to have an array of services that would serve more folks. And it was a factor in our decision not to merge with Memphis, which made a lot of sense geographically, but they were a provider and their business model was very much driven around the providing of surgical abortions. And And that was a source of some real tension on the board. Very interesting.
So kind of one of the questions, and I think it was one of the suggestion questions, but it's one of mine. It's not only what the immediate short-term viability of the organization is, but the long-term, because of the public perception, at least in the legislature, although not in public opinion polling, is that Planned Parenthood's a dirty word, and that they won't be happy until it is simply removed root and branch from Arkansas and the rest of the country, and how to respond to that, what to do about that.
Well, they are definitely trying to drive the ability to get an abortion out of the state. I mean, not just
right, but I think people like Jason Rayford, I mean, they have adopted this whole line, and I actually happen to believe, and call me crazy, that on the future radar of some of this group is contraception.
I think so too, Max. I think you're absolutely right. It's a control issue.
But I think abortion there's a possibility that it will become illegal in Arkansas. And you'll be looking at as kind of underground railroad to get women to states where they can get an abortion. I mean, I fear that, but we're really discussing that possibility. It's not just Planned Parenthood. But yes, there seems to be.
Clearly, they have a roadmap that the courts are increasingly showing the way to.
Absolutely.
To end surgical abortion.
Absolutely.
Abortion.
Both the
question then becomes
Planned
Parenthood's form of pharmaceutical abortion. And
right.
there's sort of a mix. There's been sort of a mix on that, but the appellate courts, and you know better, are now getting stocked with Trump people, and they are the 8th Circuit that we're in is terrible.
I think the 8th Circuit is the worst circuit in the world for reproductive rights right now.
I thought it was the 7th. I didn't know it was the 8th.
The 6th recently handed down a horrible opinion, but really I think the 8th gets the prize. I mean, I shouldn't have. It's stocked with what I think of are Baptist preachers. It really is. So the way forward is not clear. I mean, I think that getting pills over the internet is an avenue, frankly. And then getting women to Illinois. That's probably the closest place.
But I think you're going to have problems with the internet, that there are going to be laws that will make that illegal.
Yes, but I think detection might be difficult.
I actually have given some thought into a foundation I work with. If that day comes, do we create a fund to pay for people to go to another state? And could they make that illegal?
I think
could the Arkansas?
I think if you aided and stated, they would try to make it illegal for aiding somebody to do that, facilitating that. Whether that would stick legally, I doubt, unless it's a minor. But I'm just speculating at this point.
Welcome back to Tijuana Tuesday.
Jay, can you give me any political hope for Arkansas?
Well, I do think that, as you were suggesting, I think at the beginning that this public opinion in the state isn't nearly as conservative as the platform of the Republican Party on these issues. And I think the challenge right now is that to win a Republican nomination for governor or for U.S. Senate or anything else, I mean, you just have to, a candidate has to go so far right. And because of the dominance of that party in the state, that I think, is out of sync, out of step with public opinion in a dramatic way. I think that it really becomes, we've just got to diversify the array of political offerings to voters. And I'm not saying that Arkansas and Arkansans are, I mean, we're not California, we're not Illinois in terms of our attitudes about reproductive choice, but we are much more moderate than the voices that are at the state capitol and in executive offices. And I think there will come a day, and I do think that, sadly, it may mean a temporary return to a very problematic day that Lily was describing earlier that gets us there. But I do think that, those of us who have come of age in a world where Roe has been the law of the land, aren't going to go back there. And I'm 54. That means there are a lot of millions of folks and lots of hundreds of thousands of Arkansans that are a lot younger than me. And I don't think I think that will produce a backlash that will be politically potent.
Well, and there are a few of us left that are in the older set that remember the days before Roe v. Wade and will always defend the right of people because we know what it was like before it was there, before Roe v. Wade was there.
One thing I want to
older people.
One thing I want to talk about, I don't know what you all think, but to me this is key, is that women will not admit to having abortions. The stigma is so great. And to me, if women do not admit to that or if are ashamed of that, the right to lifers will always have power over us. And that is a tremendous power. And I wish that we could change the messaging, the culture, whatever, so that women would not be afraid to say, I've had an abortion. And I really think that's key, and I don't know how we could get there. I've begun saying it. I've had an abortion. I've had more than one. I'm not ashamed, and I'm not mentally ill, and I haven't suffered mental, damage or anything from it. But I really think every woman that has had an abortion needs to stand up and say that. Otherwise, they will always, the right to life will always have power over us.
I totally agree with Bettina on that. And I think that, the power of telling one story has transformed LGBTQ rights in America. People coming out about their lives, and it's just reshaped that whole conversation. One by one, conversation by conversation, we're a different country on that issue than we were 15, 20 years ago. And I do think that is a really powerful way of reshaping the narrative.
It failed to turn the tide a few years back, and I wonder if, and this, I'm not suggesting the woman was wrong not to do this, but there was an incredibly powerful story told by a man who was an Air Force officer whose wife had a pregnancy that they dearly wanted.
Oh, yes.
She developed a late-term complication.
Oh.
They had to make the decision to end the pregnancy late in the pregnancy. This was at the time the legislature was talking about the 11-week or the 20-week, maybe.
20-week. It was the 20-week.
And that would have deprived her and put her life at risk and forced her to carry to term a child that was not going to survive. And I just wonder, I mean, you can't want this for somebody, but it does bring to mind, I wonder if the woman in that situation could have testified. Would it have made a difference with these guys that think that people are actually making elective abortion decisions at the 23rd week of pregnancy or something? I mean,
Max, I have sat through many public health and welfare committee meetings at both the Arkansas State Senate and House. And I've been there when these stories have been presented, and then women have come forward and said that they wanted this child. At 20 weeks, they found out that this child would not survive, pregnancy. And I mean, it's all been more than once presented to the members of the Arkansas legislature. We've had psychiatrists, rape victims, women. I mean, I can't tell you the lengths that we've gone through to get, testimony that we thought would persuade these legislators. It didn't make any difference. It did not. I don't know how to explain it, but it did not.
So to reverse the line from the movie, so you're telling me there's no hope?
I'm sorry. I'm discouraged in Arkansas. I mean, I really am. I don't know for the short term. The Arkansas State Supreme Court is terrible. The 8th Circuit is terrible. Of course, the Supreme Court's, I don't know. We have to keep fighting. We have to keep providing inch by inch. We cannot give up. I firmly believe that, but I don't want to, I can't be a Pollyanna. I've got to tell it like I think it is.
Sure.
But we need more and more people, women and men, to come out and say, we've had an abortion. We support women who have abortions. We support, I don't know if I'm right about this, but Jay, I think that in terms of gay rights, people have come out in March, and I know it's been long road and it hasn't been easy, but to me, we've got to do more of that, more women, more men, more, people we've got to go to whatever it is, the streets or whatever. You cannot rely on lawyers.
We've got to elect some people that'll help. I don't think you can underestimate the fact that we went through a number of years with Democratic governors who were some more committed to reproductive rights than others, but all at least a little bit friendly. Whereas now there's none of that left. And so we need to elect some people. There's some great candidates on the state legislative ballot in Arkansas this year. Another number of women candidates. I happen to be a sexist and who think we're better off electing women than men in nearly every case. So I'm hopeful that we'll perhaps produce some gains there. Do you think we might, Jay?
I think there will be more women elected, and I do think it's both in Central Arkansas, and then I do think that in the next couple of election cycles, we are going to start to see transformative change in Northwest Arkansas. I think there's just no way that those demographic patterns don't result in a very different kind of legislator from Bentonville and Springdale and Fayetteville. And we started to see already some of those changes, but I think it could be pretty potent. I think the big story of this year, which I think is going to have mammoth repercussions, is the fact of the redistricting ballot measure being kicked off. I mean, that was the thing that really I think had the potential power to really draw district lines that would have created a more friendly legislature, more reflective legislature, I think is a better way to say it, more quickly. And I think now that's probably delayed things a little bit, but you just can't overcome people moving to Northwest Arkansas who come from other places and bring their values with them.
I should say, as a plug here, I think this is going to air before the election, November 3rd, and there remains a ballot issue that would just about kill the opportunity to try again on things like redistricting commissions,
yes,
and on open primary that would give a shot at third candidates to get on the election runoff.
But I want to give a shout out to Brandon. I see Brandon's listening. Brandon Hill, the new CEO of Planned Parenthood Great Plains. I really think he's done a terrific job with bolstering Planned Parenthood Great Plains in Arkansas with a new clinic, financially, bringing healthcare services. I really think he's doing a terrific job, and I hope that continues. And we need Planned Parenthood in Arkansas, and so keep doing what you're doing, Brandon.
We have been merged.
I hope he gives a report on the new facility. I'm not versed about how it's changed in terms of numbers of services offered and some of the additional things that have been done. We were told a little bit about that before we started recording.
Well, I think it's interesting that we have been merged before, sort of like marriages, and we finally found the happy marriage.
That's well put. I do think folks, and I know during COVID it's very hard to get out there, but when the world returns to normal, getting out to that clinic, it feels like a high quality health center. That's
it's wonderful.
Like. And our facilities before have felt like kind of embarrassing places and places that you would want to that didn't feel of the quality of the services provided.
No, it's like we were looking for someplace better always. Now we found it.
And it's a beautiful space, and we're so fortunate. And those folks who've stepped up and given over the years, but especially in the most recent years, to allow that facility to come into existence. It's really amazing. And it's an amazing facility, not just in terms of health services, which it is that, but it's also got tremendous amount of space for the growth long-term of advocacy efforts and other things that just require space. I think it really is the kind of home that can make a long-term difference here in Central Arkansas. And of course, we hope that we get something very similar in Northwest Arkansas soon.
And I'm sorry.
Oh, well, this is kind of a far field, weird, hypothetical question, but the pandemic has opened the door to telemedicine in Arkansas. something that the legislature took great steps to be sure you couldn't do reproductive health about. If we get in a situation where most people believe telemedicine is now going to be here to stay because of the pandemic, do you think there's an avenue for people in our field to say, wait a minute, everybody else can do telemedicine, but we can't?
Well, let me just say, as somebody who does advocacy and litigation, besides Dr. Janet Cathy and Dr. Stephanie Ho, it's very difficult to get a doctor to come forward and say, yeah, telemedicine should be done for, a medication abortion, just like other services. So I don't know. We need the support of the medical community. They know that medically speaking, there should be, a distance, ability to have telemedicine for abortion. It's because of the political climate. We cannot get a doctor to come forward except for those two wonderful women. And we've literally begged doctors to come forward and say, don't say you're against abortion, but medically speaking, you can have a safe telemedicine abortion. So that's the first thing, a plea to doctors. The second thing is, I would say that the various legislators on the subject of abortion and telemedicine are exceedingly dishonest when it comes to the medical evidence. They'll say it's unsafe, and it's not unsafe. So those are the hurdles that we face. So I don't see any time soon where telemedicine of abortion will be allowed. But if we could get the medical community, the members of American, ACOG,
American College of Obstetrics and Gynecology.
In Arkansas to come forward, that would go a long way. But doctors won't generally, except with those two wonderful exceptions. I don't know if that answers your question. So,
well, it was just thinking out loud.
I do think, and it certainly telemedicine has been a real lifesaver for Planned Parenthood during this period, in terms of just getting women and men to their tradition, to things outside of the abortion practice, but other appointments. It's been important, and this has been a really challenging time for Planned Parenthood Great Plains, just as in other places, because of COVID. COVID has really created tremendous challenges, and including the fact that we're having a virtual fundraiser rather than the beautiful time that we get to have, because garden party is one of the best events in this community, in terms of just the spirit of the event, and it's almost always gorgeous weather, and it's a real shame that we didn't get to do that this year, and COVID is harming fundraising, but also harming practice as well.
Yeah.
Well, so what do we do about image? Is it advertising? Is it some kind of public relations? Is there a strategy to turn around the negative feelings that exist in the political world, at least, if not in the world? National polling shows Planned Parenthood still enjoys a positive rating. I don't know if it's ever been directly polled in Arkansas. I know the Arkansas poll regularly says Arkansans want to keep abortion safe and legal, and rare, and with a lot of restrictions, but preserve it. What can Planned Parenthood do?
I
keep on keeping on. Just keep on doing what we're doing.
I think there's a messaging. I usually shoot my mouth off when I shouldn't, but there's a whole big thing about messaging. For the ACLU Reproductive Freedom Project, and also for Planned Parenthood, I'm always, there's messaging. There's a lot of research done about messaging. There's messaging teams. There's communication specialists, and I'm usually told, don't go off message, because I'm prone to do that. I don't know about the message. I think we need to figure out how to message, how to communicate. My perception is we're not winning the messaging war in Arkansas. And I wonder and think there's got to be a way to message more effectively to get more people to understand why abortion should be safe, legal, and rare. And the message changed. The messaging changed in its emphasis. It's almost from year to year. I'm not a messaging person, but I think there has to be a way to communicate the importance of having abortion be legal better than we've been able to do. I don't know what you others think.
I wonder if now that we're providing a much larger assortment of services, does Planned Parenthood imply just a very restricted area of services? And maybe we want to think about, if not changing our name, doing some sort of an explanation, because Planned Parenthood is limited. It doesn't take in all the STDs, all the other services that we offer.
Well, and that, Lily, I think that's a really interesting point, and to connect the dots a little bit, I do think it's the messengers and the variety of messengers that really do reflect that array of important, empowering, and egalitarian producing experiences that folks have as a result of their time at Planned Parenthood. It's poor trans folks who get access to hormone treatments that they need to be more authentic versions of themselves. It's folks of all sexes and races and creeds who become empowered as a result of the high quality services. And so I do think I don't know if it's a name change necessarily, but I do think it is really relying upon those authentic messengers to tell the story and to encourage the telling of the story, not just in advertising campaigns, but in daily life.
Well, Planned Parenthood is not just about parenthood. It's about planning, but not only planning for parenthood.
No, it's just a broad array of health services. Well, I'll tell you one place this side is losing, and that's on social media, I think. Facebook particularly. As somebody who has to work in social media because of my job, I can tell you, I do a daily video of news roundup, and the anti-forces, they troll constantly with their message of you're a baby killer or whatever their talking point of the day is. That one's pretty popular with the Jason Raperts in the world. And I don't know how much time the organization has to think about media strategies, but some of that's part of it. I mean, the disinformation, that's one of the things mentioned in the information sheets, is we're a victim of disinformation. The totally baseless thing about fetal tissue is a pretty good example. I mean, that was a setup. It was just wrong from the get-go. But I can tell you today, even though that's been thoroughly resolved in the favor of the organization, there are millions of people out there that believe otherwise. And that's a real dilemma, it seems.
Could we have a new ad or something about fetal tissue has made Trump's recovery possible?
No, I did an item about remdesivir and the Regeneron treatment, and pointed out that not only had Donald Trump used drugs in which fetal tissue was a part of the research protocol, but also Jason Rapert, and he went nuts. He went nuts, said I was a liar, fake news. That remdesivir, he'd been cleared by Right to Life. He assured me. Well, just
I love it.
Read the newspaper, Jason. You're just wrong about that. Right? He was not happy to be called out on his remdesivir.
I love it. I mean, God, I got to get my small pleasures, right?
Well, one of my favorites is looking at the license plate that says "Choose Life," and I always want to go up and say thank you for being pro-choice.
Yeah.
Well, let's see here. What else if I have on my list thing? There was a question. Y'all are here as kind of historical figures. Is there a moment in the history in Arkansas that stands out for y'all of the organization's time here?
I think maybe for me, it was the first garden party. And I think it was the very first one when Mary Steenburgen was one of our guests. And we had a good crowd, and we also had some pickets. And I'm trying to think who suggested it, said what we need to do is do pledge a picket.
Right.
So, and we raised money. We asked everybody to pledge $1 a picket, $5 a picket. And we told the pickets how much money we had raised, hoping it would discourage them, which unfortunately it never did, but we raised money every year on their picketing.
Well, that's a great idea. That's wonderful.
It is, right.
Yeah, Jason Rayford wanted me to be ashamed that I was honored one year by Planned Parenthood. And I mean, I do think I was talking to my wife about this somewhat, and I mean, I'm not at all embarrassed to say I support Planned Parenthood. And
What do you mean embarrassed?
You're
you're proud.
I mean,
you're not embarrassed. You're
oh,
proud.
right. No, of course I am. I'm not at all reluctant to do so. And it does trouble me. It's like you're talking about the doctors in Arkansas that just don't want to be associated with it. But I understand the economic reality of the pressure that can be put on people. I'm not unsympathetic to the plight they're in, but I think people standing up is ultimately the key.
I agree. All the women and men, but mainly women. Women cannot depend on the lawyers to win victories for them anymore in this state.
Not anymore.
They cannot depend on the politicians to do the right thing. I exhort women. Women need to take to the streets, vote, whatever it takes. Say they've had an abortion. I mean, take back their rights. It's up to us. It's,
I will say the greatest moment in the last 5 years was the Women's March. Not just in Washington, but the one in Little Rock as well. And the pink hats. It was fabulous.
I agree. So that's what I think. Women need to get out there, be like Belarus.
Well, so in 2 weeks, what's the outlook, Jay?
I do think that several things I think are, the legislative races that I think there could be some change in the legislature. Certainly not transforming who's in control, but the margins, and I think that is deeply relevant. And then I do think that that Women's March that you mentioned, Max, I think has continued. I think several of those candidacies would point right back to that event. And I do think that if the second district elects a woman of color, it unquestionably goes back to that moment in terms of empowering folks. I think that this summer, in terms of the Black Lives Matter movement, I think it also, despite the very different issues in play, that all ties together. I think this has been a transformative 3 years in terms of people taking to the streets and taking power back, and we don't know exactly how obviously that will play out. There will be certainly some losses as well, but I think that all of those wins that may occur are all going to be tied back to that inauguration day, the day after the inauguration of Donald Trump, when those protests began. I do think one thing in terms of the history, I think one thing that it's important not to lose. I do think Dr. Elders, who had a very rocky, of course, time as Surgeon General, from the appointment on, but she was a crucially important figure here in Arkansas in terms of her work and her fight for normalization of healthy sexuality and choice. And I think she will probably be seen by history in a pretty favorable light in terms of the way in which she really was a pretty, consequential and somewhat revolutionary figure in terms of American public health. So I'll point that as something that ties to the Planned Parenthood here in Arkansas that I think has some historical relevance.
Yeah, she's a
Thank
great
you so
person.
much.
I know money
Yeah,
is
that's
limited,
great.
but might more advertising of the availability of services be a good thing?
Yeah.
I mean, the organization isn't a secret, I know, particularly for people in need, but I mean, billboards, I don't know. You know.
No, it's a great point. And I think your point earlier about social media is a really good one. And it's surprising how many roadblocks we hit in even purchasing advertising like billboards. They're not, sometimes our billboards are locally owned. I remember the first day that I got here, we had ordered custom cabinetry, probably $8,000 in custom cabinetry, not in Arkansas, but in Missouri. And the guy delivered them and saw the Planned Parenthood on the door. He loaded them all back up and drove away. So he didn't tell me that this was Planned Parenthood. I said, but this is $8,000 in countertops. It's like, you're not even just set them out. You're not even installing them. You don't even have to walk into the clinic. And no, he said, he told, I was managing the inside. He said, well, I'd rather burn these. Than I thought that's the mentality that we compete with, right? Someone who will damage their own business and could jeopardize their own livelihood, instead of, absolving themselves that they have a trade and the trade provides services without discrimination or bias. And that's very much what we're up against. But yeah, so the same goes with advertising. Not all media outlets will give advertising to us. Definitely billboards are company by company to determine.
But I think that the people who work at Planned Parenthood and Little Rock Family Planning Services, the people day to day who provide these services, who are so non-judgmental and so really wonderful to these people, I think they're the ones that deserve the accolades, because they do operate in a difficult environment, but they do it, and they know it's important, and I know they feel rewarded by the people they serve, that they are really doing a service which keeps them going. And I think they need to know that we appreciate them, and we do. And it's without those day-to-day nurses and clerical people and doctors that we couldn't provide these services we're talking about. And they're the frontline workers, right? There's
courage involved there.
Absolutely. Some of them carry guns.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point. And I know we've had a lot of conversations about the change in medical education and the absence of education about abortion services in med schools. But I think that had real impact in Little Rock. Mo Smith is who delivered me in 1966, yet he was a provider of abortion, and that the way in which there was, across the OBGYN community, really kind of almost a continuum of services from birth, birthing babies to aiding women in their choices. And now it's really kind of a much more factionalized world. I think that's been a real challenge.
It was Amendment 68 that made a huge difference.
You're very
because
right.
Prior to that, you could get an abortion at UMS, for instance.
Yep.
You could get public,
So I do think that's a real change. I think it has impacted across the country, but I think especially in this market, it's had a disproportionate impact because there were tons of older providers. And they one by one either retired or died, and what we have been left with is a much more kind of hidden away abortion practice.
But abortion also political evolution. Abortion became a part of the very rigid dogma of the rising Republican Party, which was cemented by Barack Obama. I mean, race played a big role in the huge changeover. But the ERA, abortion, lower taxes, holding down the underclass, that was just part and parcel of an unwavering political agenda. And eventually it came to control the state, and there's nobody with the courage to buck it at the legislature, because they look around at who got elected and they say, well, that's what you got to do to get here.
Yeah.
So,
And it's also, in Little Rock itself in the 80s and 90s and early years of this day, I mean, it just became a white flight community in a lot of ways. And the way in which race really reshaped and dominated all conversations, whether it's about crime or no matter what, I think it just overwhelmed any of that spirit that had kind of previously been very defining in Little Rock. So I think a lot of things kind of came together.
So I think, Max, if I may take a little bit of credence to say, where do the speakers who have been with us, I think committed and convicted, current, past, and present, where would they like to see Little Rock, not just Planned Parenthood, but sexual and reproductive health in Little Rock go? Where do they see us in the future? And we're just one player in the game.
well, I think Little Rock is receptive. The problem's the rest of the state.
Yeah, I think Max is right on that. Little Rock is a progressive place, but it's a small place. I mean, it's only 200,000 people, and it's an island in a Red Sea. I do think that as an organization in Little Rock, you noted the numbers in terms of the services we provide to Black residents of this community and how that's increasing. I think we have always had a challenge in diversifying the lay leadership of the organization in Little Rock. Mm-hmm. That we have remained a very white organization. I think it's been a real challenge. And part of it is it's a lot of things. It's about religion. It's about the poverty of Blacks historically in our community. But I think that's a real challenge for us moving forward is reflecting that diversity in who we are as an organization and having it match the diversity of those whom we serve.
I think one of the greatest challenges we have is the education. With the advent of multiple charter schools, it's going to be more and more difficult to make sure that our minorities receive the same education as the privileged whites. And this bothers me a great deal because it's becoming more and more divided and separated. And I think that, to me, education is the only way we're going to see changes, and it has to start early.
I like to see more progressive women elected to state office, in Arkansas. I think that's key to seeing a change in, the legislation, which would maybe lead to, abortion being more accessible to more women in Arkansas. I think, so that's where I'm putting all my emphasis, trying to change the character of the politics in Arkansas. I would love to see, and I don't know, I would like to see more honesty in this whole, discussion about abortion. I see so much misinformation and dishonesty about it, not on our side, but on the other side. I just wish people would be honest about it. If they're against abortion, just say they're against abortion for religious reasons or whatever, but don't cloak it in dishonesty about medical safety and welfare for women and all that stuff. So I would like to see in the future that kind of dishonesty end. And I want to see lots more progressive women elected in Arkansas.
Amen.
Ready to begin our Fund a Need? Me too. Let's help some patients tonight. We'll kick off this Fund a Need program with our $1,500 level, which provides one patient with an IUD insertion that can last up to 7 years. An IUD, or intrauterine device, is a small implant used to prevent pregnancy for 5 to 7 years. Though IUDs are one of the most effective birth control methods out there and an important tool for treating hormonal conditions like PCOS, the cost of an IUD without insurance prevents many patients from being able to access this vital and often life-changing care. Next up, who wants to give to several patients at once? A donation of $1,000 will provide 4 patients with an annual exam, including breast and cervical cancer screenings. Preventative screenings for cancers can help detect cell changes early in treatable stages. These preventative screenings are often only covered by insurance after a patient reaches a certain age or if the patient can provide specific genetic risk factors. Uninsured patients are also less likely to access preventative care because it's often unaffordable to patients paying out of pocket. Now, would you like to help make a deep difference in a patient's life? A donation of $750 will provide a patient with a gender-affirming care such as hormone therapy. Hormone therapy is often an important part of medical transition process for patients who are transgender and/or non-binary. Gender-affirming care is life-saving, time-sensitive, and essential. Delaying hormone replacement therapy or pausing therapy because of cost can be difficult and harmful for transgender patients. Next, let's help keep folks safe during this pandemic. A donation of $500 will provide 4 patients with telehealth care visits. Patients seeking birth control prescriptions, STI testing and treatment, UTI testing, and several other vital services can be virtually seen through 2 telehealth platforms, PP Direct and PP Connect. To support telehealth visits for 4 patients who want to receive distance care during this pandemic, please visit bit.ly/supportppgp. That's bit.ly/supportppgp and make a gift of $500 tonight. In another innovative way to provide care, a donation of $250 will provide 5 at-home sex education kits mailed directly to patients' doors. These mail-order safer sex kits are designed to ensure education doesn't end because the pandemic prevents our traditional in-person offerings. Interested individuals simply go online to pick the offerings they want, from condoms to at-home HIV testing, all without coming into a health center. Now, are you interested in helping stop the spread of HIV? A donation of $100 will provide a patient a PrEP or PEP office visit, which includes lab fees. Pre-exposure prophylaxis, also commonly referred to as PrEP, is a daily pill that can help prevent HIV. Taking PrEP every day can lower a patient's chances of getting HIV from sex by more than 90%. PEP, or post-exposure prophylaxis, is a short-term treatment for people who've already been exposed to HIV within the last 72 hours and is very effective at preventing HIV if used consistently and correctly. Now, finally, here's our last chance to give tonight in this Fund a Need. Are you ready to support this fight against sexually transmitted infections? A donation of just $50 will provide a patient with STI testing. Despite stigma and discomfort around conversations regarding STIs, most people will have an encounter with someone who recently has or has had an STI in their lifetime. 1 in 2 sexually active persons will test positive for an STI before the age of 25. Your contribution of $50 will provide testing for a patient who has been exposed to an STI or a routine screening for a patient who is completing their check. Now, I know you all contributed so generously prior to this evening and again just now, so let me say from the bottom of my heart, thank you so very much from all of us staff members here at Planned Parenthood Great Plains.